Hi, today we're having a debate about Measure A, which will be on the November 4th ballot. I'm Mel Van Duzen, and I'm going to be acting as moderator. For Measure A is Mike Kasperzak, and Mike is an attorney and a Mountain View City Council member. And against the measure is Gary Wesley, and Gary is a longtime resident and an attorney. I myself am not an attorney. Measure A sets council member salaries at $1,000 a month, up from the current $600 a month. The mayor will get 25% more. It adjusts the annual salary for cost of living increases up to 5%, and it authorizes the absence of council members from regular meetings with the mayor's permission or for official business. Frankly, I was kind of perplexed when I first heard about Measure A. I was aware that in some communities, council members volunteer their time for their duties, while in others, they work for what seemed to me to be very low salaries. But I really didn't think about it much until now, and perhaps many of you are in the same situation. So I would like to begin this debate by asking Mike, you're for Measure A. Would you like to tell us why?
Sure, happy to, Mel. Well, the issue of whether members of the City Council should be compensated was laid to rest back in 1968 when the voters first decided to compensate council members at $250 a month. 16 years later, the voters reaffirmed that when they doubled the salary to $500 a month and adopted the general law pay scale in the state government code. Since that time, over 30 years, there's been significant inflation in the world and in our economy, and yet the council compensation has not adjusted for inflation over that time. If adjusted for inflation, that $500 today would be almost $1,150 a month. So this ballot measure would raise the compensation to $1,000 a month, which actually is not fully adjusting it for inflation, but would set it at $1,000 a month and then would adjust it annually for inflation. I'll note that cities around us, City of Sunnyvale, they make the compensation there is about $2,100 a month. City of Fremont, the council just raised their salary to $1,950 a month, and a committee of the Palo Alto City Council is considering $1,000 a month. So the proponents believe this is a measure that really just sort of adjusts the compensation to today's cost of living and may make it something that more people will engage in the process. So we have a full vote of candidates this year, but people that don't have their own business or are retired frequently don't run for city council or don't get elected.
Right. Okay, Gary, you're against the measure. Tell us why.
Well, so Mike focused on the salary that council members receive. Most people that run for council want to make a difference and have the authority to make important decisions that affect the entire city, including themselves. That's why they run. They're not running for the money. They're not running for other benefits, but actually there are a lot of other benefits. In our city, city council members receive the benefits that are otherwise reserved for full-time employees, but not for part-time employees, as far as I know. Mike could let us know if that's incorrect. And so they get full-time employee benefits, and then how much that is worth depends upon the circumstances of the individual council member, who may have other benefits in a job and not take any city benefits, might have a wife, might have kids. So it's going to vary, and Mike can let us know whether there's anybody currently on the council of the 7 members who doesn't take benefits. Then we've had for a long time in Mountain View VIP passes to Shoreline Amphitheater, which for a season pass would sell for more than $10,000 a year, but they were just given a couple of tickets to council members. And I understand that policy and procedure has changed a little bit, where council members don't get as much of that as they used to. And then council members get reimbursed for authorized travel. They get some equipment to help do their jobs. And they qualify for appointment to other boards and commissions. So if they take on those additional duties. They also pick up some money there. But a lot of people who run for council have in mind running for higher office or making business contacts. And much money is to be made if we want to put everything in terms of money in those business contacts or in assuming higher office. Right. So these are all things that weren't talked about by the proponents.
Right. You're both attorneys.
Don't hold that against
no,
us.
No, not at all, not at all. My next question is there a formula for determining council members' salaries based on state law?
Yes, there is. The general law cities, Mountain View is a charter city. The compensation is based on the population. So for cities between 50,000 and 75,000, which Mountain View was until about 2 years ago, just after the last census, the compensation is $500 a month. For when a city reaches 75,001 person, the compensation under state law goes to $600, and then it doesn't adjust again until the population reaches 150,001. Mm-hmm. So, and there are scales lower than 50 and over 150,000. But I think the highest salary on that scale is like $750 a month for cities over 250,000. But clearly cities like Los Angeles, I think the council members are full-time, fully paid employees. They make about $100,000 a year. Members of the San Jose City Council are in the $70,000 to $80,000 a year, mm-hmm. and that sort of thing.
Right. Gary, does that take into account the cost of living in a particular city? For example, living in Fresno has a different cost of living index than living in San Francisco.
Well, Mike was just saying that the general law that applies to general law cities mm-hmm. is based upon population. Mm-hmm. They don't try to get into that. But in a city, one can choose to have your own constitution called a charter. Mm-hmm. And since 1952, we've had a charter in this city. I think it's 52. And we can write our own rules. And so we have kept our council pay as opposed to other benefits at a level that is shared by most cities across the state for these part-time employees we call council members. But we can change it. And it could be that we want to move to a system of paying real money in salary to council members other than these small amounts. Right. And I don't know whether that debate was had in committee or not. But if this were a proposal to increase salaries to $50,000 or $100,000 a year, then people could dedicate full time to these jobs. But this is instead just a proposal to increase by $400 a month, which is mm-hmm. almost nothing, council salaries. And it's subject to the criticism that there were frankly more important things to put on the ballot for the cost of this measure, right. which the city clerk I think estimated was more than $50,000 to put it on the ballot. So we should have been focused on whether we need a bond measure, for example, or a series of them in Mountain View for capital projects, and instead this got on the ballot.
Yeah. So in other words, it's left up to the city to determine what's appropriate based on the median income, I suppose.
Well, I mean, a couple of things. First off, under our charter, only the voters can change the compensation. Under general law city, the city council can adjust their own salaries mm-hmm. by a vote. But in Mountain View, under our charter, and even under this charter amendment, changing the compensation other than what is in the charter amendment still has to be done by the voters. So sure. the city council cannot change their own salary. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Gary mentioned was, and this has happened recently, I think down in Santa Barbara, the voters in Santa Barbara decided to pay the city council members a full wage, and I think they make 80% of the median income. Mm-hmm. That's not what's being proposed in Mountain View. Right. This is not a full-time job, as talks about in the ballot statement. You know, city council members probably spend between 25 and 35 hours a week working on the council. Typical meetings are 6 to 8 hours on Tuesday nights, meetings with constituents, reading the materials which is usually a stack 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick of materials, going to meetings of the council. So there's a lot of time involved, as well as being called and all of the other reporting things that members of the city council have to do.
Gary, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, the main argument in favor of this measure is that an extra $400 a month or $500 for mayor might encourage somebody to run for council who otherwise wouldn't run. And I don't know that there is anyone among the 9 candidates that we currently have for 3 seats who is banking on having this measure passed for that extra $400 a month. I don't know of anybody out there waiting in the wings to run for council who would run for an extra $400 a month. So if Mike has the names of anybody who wanted to run but couldn't because it's too low, or is running hoping that this will pass, then that would be useful information.
Mike, your comment on that?
And I don't know that, and clearly we have 9 council candidates running. I think the thing that Mr. Wesley misses is the fact that 30 years ago, the council was paid $500, and that $500 had a value. Nothing has changed in terms of of that $500, and yet all of the other benefits, the reason people did serve on the council, they got $500. That $500 today has a value of about $200 in terms of its buying power. So the buying power was such in 1984, and it is not the same today. And so this measure is really an effort to sort of restore the value of what the council was being paid, as opposed to it's just being a 5 and a 0 and a 0.
Right. Okay. Let's get away from money for a while. But before we do that, I just want to put things into a little bit of perspective. On the internet, I looked up the highest income metropolitan areas in the United States. And it's probably no surprise that number 1 is San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, with a $63,000 median income, followed by New York and Washington, D.C. And then down the line in 280th place was Laredo, Texas, at $10,759 a year, which would be about what a council member would make if the measure passed. To afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Santa Clara County, you need to make $31.71 an hour. And to live comfortably in the Bay Area, for one person starting out, it's felt that you would need about $60,000 a year, although some people might dispute that. They might think $70,000 is more appropriate. Before I go on to anything else, do you have anything to say about that?
Well,
I think the costs of living in the Bay Area have grown dramatically.
Right.
And I think, that's obvious. Gary sort of made the point of, people don't run because this job pays $400 or $500 or $600 or even $1,000. But what we don't know is how many people might consider running that sort of make in the $50,000 to $80,000, but they don't have the job flexibility of being a business owner or something like that, and they can't justify sort of taking time off to waive 1 day a week of revenue from their job. But $1,000 a month would be about the equivalent of taking 1 day off a week if you were earning $60,000 a year. And that might be something that would get somebody who is making an average wage in Mountain View to consider more the possibility of joining the council. Of the candidates that are running, several are self-employed lawyers, are retirees, and we end up still having this council that does not truly reflect the breadth and diversity of our community.
I think there are 2 members who are supported by their spouses, 2 business owners, 1 business executive, and 2 retirees.
On the current council, yes.
Okay. Gary, do you want to wrap up this segment of it?
Well, so there are people with jobs that are running, and an extra $400 won't do them a lot of good. But just getting back to the finances, I've listed in the argument against Measure A, which is in the sample ballot that everybody gets toward the back, some of the things that council members get. And we have an opportunity with Council Member Kasperzak here to explain what this is really worth. So for example, city benefits, otherwise reserved for full-time employees, how much does the city pay for that? Now I know it depends upon the person and whether he takes it in his family, but it'd be good to have those figures because those are very high, a very high cost that didn't exist 10 years ago and something very important for a lot of people. And then with regard to expense accounts and VIP passes, maybe the council member could fill us in on the value of some of that.
Well, I mean, I know and Mr. Wesley pointed out that the council used to receive two passes to every event at Shoreline Amphitheater. That changed significantly several years ago, and now council members get 2 tickets to 4 shows for oversight purposes. They can get some additional 4 tickets, but that has to be declared as compensation, right. And then they can also purchase tickets. But that's a benefit that was still available, before when $500 was worth $500. Yeah. The same with the benefits that Mr. Wesley mentions is those benefits have been available to the council members throughout the course of time, even when the value of $1 was the value of $1, not the value of 20% of $1. Yeah.
When was the last time you went to Shoreline?
I last went to Shoreline for the 4th of July. That's the only concert I've been to this year.
Okay, Gary?
Oh, it's been a few 4ths of July since I've been there, but I think that was the last time I was there. Most of the music isn't quite my era.
It's not my era. I would rather be going to the Mountain Winery these days to see
well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the duties of a council member. Now, you said they work maybe 20 to 30 hours a week. I'd like to get into a little bit more about what a council member does and especially about why they do this.
Well, I think people want to serve their community. And
why?
That's why I do it. Well, I mean, why do people volunteer, which is probably the closest example, but why do people join public service as opposed to going and getting a high-paid job at Google or Cisco or something like that? People do want to serve their communities, and it's intriguing work, it's important work. We have a system of government that our governments are run by people elected to set the broad policy implications, and you want people to do that. So why some people choose to volunteer and engage in public service and some don't, I really don't know the reasons. I personally come from a background, my family was very engaged in their communities, and that's something that I picked up over time.
Sure. Gary, I think your take on this might be a little bit different. What is it?
Well, again, if we want to get people to run for council that are going to be significantly different than the folks we have running nowadays, we need more than $400 extra a month. If you want people to work full-time at this, which it could be a full-time job if you really wanted to get into it, and take a look at unfunded pensions and how it is that in the next 10 years, half of all the money that the city pays out will be for pensions and not for anybody currently working for the city. If you want to take on the big issues and you feel like you should have full-time council people in there, whether it's 7 or we reduce it to 5, then that might be considered. And we might want to pay for that, so we encourage some really good people to run.
Yeah.
Now, if I could just jump in, Gary sort of talks about, well, maybe we should be talking about paying the council a full-time wage. It's a little bit ironic. In 2006, the voters narrowly defeated a similar ballot measure that would have raised the salary to $1,500 a month. The opposition in that election said there's no doubt that the council salary should be raised, but that $1,500 was too high. And in the opposition statement, they said what would be better would be to defeat $1,500 and vote in a $1,000 compensation limit, which is what was put on the ballot this year. And so the city was told $1,500 is too much, so we put in what the opposition said in 2006 would be an appropriate amount. And now I'm hearing Mr. Wesley say, maybe we should actually go to full-time.
Well, of course, I wasn't the opposition. It was 3 former mayors, and maybe just their tactic to defeat the measure at that time that you supported was to suggest it was a bit high and to draw those people that maybe would believe that, along with the others who thought this was entirely off topic and wouldn't make any difference. I don't know why people voted 53% against this. It did almost pass. This is probably going to pass. But it really wasn't worthy of the ballot.
Yeah. I was talking with a former mayor of a community that I won't name, and I went to a garage sale and just happened to bump into this guy. And I asked him, hey, can you give me some advice about how I might proceed about this debate that I'm supposed to be moderating? And he thought about it for a while, and he said, well, you know, council members will feel obligated to work if they are paid something reasonable. Are there cases where when council members feel maybe they're not paid sufficient and they might not be able to work, or they get pissed off because they feel they're being ripped off for all the work they have to do? I mean, if I was paid a low wage and I felt I was being overworked, I don't know what I would do.
I don't, you know, as Gary knows from, you know, anything is possible. So anybody
Yes.
could feel any way. I don't see that of any members of the Mountain View City Council. And
Thank God I'm not a member.
I haven't seen that in my experience
Yeah.
on the City Council.
Yeah.
I mean, the members of the City Council take seriously the work they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend a lot of time doing it. And they do it at this point knowing that it only pays $600 a month. The fact of the matter remains is that, you know, that has not grown with inflation. In the first 16 years, the voters in Mountain View doubled the council compensation, and then it didn't change for 30 years. And it just seems that it's a time for even what was the salary to catch up with inflation.
Yeah. Gary, do you feel that it might be possible for a member to feel that he's not being sufficiently compensated and therefore he won't do his work?
I can't imagine that. I can't imagine somebody on the council having pursued that because he or she wants to be making important decisions,
Yeah.
worried about $600 or $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be done. If you want to do a good job, the city staff throws a lot at you. There's a lot to read. And if you want to be a real watchdog, you're going to have to spend a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. Gary, I think you said that there are 9 people running for 3 seats. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. And you said that's ample evidence for the fact that maybe money may not be an issue. But people will run under present conditions. Is it conceivable to you that, you know, at some point in the future, if the salary was raised substantially, that would bring a different group of people into the council?
Well, it could. And so if you want to change it significantly...
Are we interested in diversity here, more diversity?
Well,
I mean, everyone on the council owns a home. I understand that there are 3 people running who are renters and they're working full time. I can't wrap my mind around how they would make a go of it, but continue.
Okay, so we have some renters running this time.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, but they won't talk about it, they could vote for rent controlled, even though they're renters who would benefit directly, because something that's of general benefit to the city that incidentally benefits council members doesn't disqualify them. Same is true with homeowners. So the homeowners that are on the council now who have expanded the supply of offices but not housing and have seen this big increase in the value of homes, the sale price of homes, and a benefit to themselves also aren't disqualified.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, comment from you and then we'll wrap up.
Well, on what?
Is it conceivable that if the salary was substantially raised at some point in the future, that would bring in a more diverse group of people rather than just people who... you cannot buy a home on what council members are paid.
Right. No, if you did something like they did in Santa Barbara, where a council member was paid, say, 80% of the median income, and the median income for a single person in the area is about $84,000. Mm-hmm. So about $60,000 a year is a salary. I think that would definitely bring in an entirely different type of person to be candidates. It might bring in people that work as a retail clerk, or a police officer, or I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of different types of jobs, many of which get paid well under $100,000.
Sure.
And at some point, I think people would say, I would consider doing that because that's a full-time job, because I can't do the job as a part-time person.
Sure. Okay, well, we've wrapped up the debate, and now I'd like to go through to closing statements. So if you feel there's anything that has not been covered, could you give us a minute for a closing statement? I'll begin with you.
Well, I think Mike just admitted that a much more significant measure would have been paying real money to council people to see whether that might draw some additional candidates and they could dedicate full-time to the job. In Palo Alto, they have 9 people on their council. They pay about the same that we do. They have a proposal now to cut it down to 7. Maybe it ought to be 5. Sunnyvale's 7. But we need people to really focus on what they're doing, and if the council had put on the ballot an alternative to pay real money instead of just an extra $400 a month, we could have had a significant debate.
Yeah. Okay, Mike?
Well, and I'll note
Closing
from
statements.
what Mr. Wesley said is Palo Alto is currently looking at reducing their council from 9 to 7. A committee of their council, however, is also looking at raising the salary to $1,000 a month. And I'll note that in Palo Alto, the city council can adjust their salary, whereas in Mountain View, the voters can. This measure seeks to adjust the salary to adjust it for inflation over the past 30 years. It leaves the control of setting the salary with the voters of Mountain View, and it can't hurt in terms of being a way to perhaps bring some more diversity to the city council by at least having a compensation level that at least is perceived at valuing the position more than $500 or $600 a month does.
Okay. Mike Kasperzak and Gary Wesley, I'd like to thank you both for making it so comfortable for me to be the moderator here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mel.
Yeah, okay. Well, I started out this debate by being somewhat perplexed myself, and now the debaters here have made the situation far more clear to me, and I think they've made it far more clear to you. So the only thing that remains to be done is for you to get out there and vote on November 4th. So thank you so much for listening.
Or as soon as you get your ballot.